we flew into the O'Hare airport, and we were just like going through like all this like big city traffic, everything. We went to the mission home, which was kind of like in one of the bigger suburbs of Chicago, and so everything was like hustle and bustle. And then we get assigned our areas, and I drive and drive and drive to the middle of nowhere through cornfields for like 4 hours into this small town. And I mean, it wasn't like super small, but it was definitely smaller than I was expecting for Chicago. And that's when I realized that my mission, even though like some of it in the Chicago West Mission, there are in the suburbs and there's like more highly populated, a lot of it are just farm towns in the middle of cornfields, Illinois. And it was really like a large variety because I was able to serve in both the suburbs and also in the country. And my first area was actually just a couple hours from Nauvoo. And so even though Nauvoo wasn't in our mission, it was really cool to be able to talk to people who had possibly heard of Nauvoo or like, oh, hey, that sounds like a cool place. We'll go there, and just introduce them to the church that way. The languages, there's a lot of Spanish missionaries in the mission and then English missionaries. And when you get closer to Chicago, there are a lot of random languages that you come across. During my mission, there was one point where my companion was waiting for her visa to go to Bulgaria. And so she was learning Bulgarian. And we were knocking doors one night, and we always run into Hispanics all the time. And I don't know Spanish very well, but I would try to talk to them, just like a basic door approach, so that we could like send the hermanas there to start teaching them. And so we knocked on this door, and this guy came, and he just kind of like shook his head and in like some accent was like, no English, no English. And so my companion, who was kind of late and she was kind of annoyed that I always tried to talk to these Spanish people, just started walking away, just like hoping that I would follow. But instead I start like trying to talk to this guy, and he's like, no English, no English. And I'm just like, this guy doesn't sound Hispanic or look Hispanic. And I just like point to my companion and I'm like, well, she knows Bulgarian. And this guy is like, oh, Bulgarski. And then she's like, what? And he starts talking, and she's like, I can understand him. I know what he's saying. I was like, talk to him. I don't know what he's saying. And then even though she had only, like she was in the MTC for like 9 weeks, and she had only been out in the field studying on her own for like a month, and she didn't know a whole lot of Bulgarian, but she was able to speak to this guy who wasn't even speaking Bulgarian. He was speaking Macedonian, which is similar to Bulgarian, and they were able to communicate, and she was able to introduce him to the Book of Mormon, and we were able to get a Book of Mormon in that language for him, and it was great. So the boundaries of the mission, it's mostly just like northern Illinois. There's a little part that goes up into Wisconsin, and the actual city, none of the actual city of Chicago within the limits, that's its own Chicago mission. But like the western suburbs and down to Bloomington Normal area, I don't know if anyone knows where that is, but that's pretty much as southern as it goes, and then it just goes pretty much northern Illinois. Yeah, there's a Chicago temple, and it's slightly out of the mission boundaries, so you don't get to go too often, but we are allowed to go. At least when I was in the mission, they might change it at some point, but we were allowed to go usually like once every 3 transfers or so. So certain areas that you serve in, you're not allowed to go to the temple because it's too far, but also certain areas that you serve in, you're able to go to the Nauvoo temple because that's the closest temple. So it all depends on where you serve. Some people can serve in areas during times where they don't go to the temple at all during their time serving, but then they get to go before they leave. And then some people get to go like once every 4 transfers all the time, and yeah. So a lot of people have heard of Mormons, mostly from the Book of Mormon musical, because it plays in Chicago. And then some people have heard of it, if you serve close to Nauvoo, they've heard of like some of the church history, not a lot, but they've heard bits and pieces of it, a lot of it not entirely correct. So there are some wards, there are a lot of wards, but there are also some places where there are branches. There's not a whole lot of members there, but there are enough, and like you have members who can go out with you to appointments and who can feed you meals. It's not like the middle of nowhere, no one's Mormon. So my first area was Bloomington, and I had been there for about 2 transfers when the ward split with another ward in the area, the Bloomington Normal area. And so then I was transferred to the Bloomington second ward just for a bit before I got transferred totally out of the area. And then I went to Sycamore, which was another kind of corn farm town, small town place. And then I went to Elgin, which is a suburb, kind of more suburban area. And then I went to Belvedere, which was another kind of farm town place, just small little, lots of cornfields. And then I was in St. Charles, which was a suburb. My last area was St. Charles, and I was there for 6 months as well, 4 transfers. And that, so St. Charles, we actually lived in the city of West Chicago, which makes it sound really cool, like West Chicago, but it's not like West Chicago. It's just a town called West Chicago because it's west of Chicago. And there are trains there too. It was kind of almost like a similar feeling to Belvedere, I think, just with like the type of kind of more rundown little town place with trains. But yeah, so I was in the St. Charles East area. There were also people who covered the St. Charles West area, all in the St. Charles ward. And our half of the town was like more not as wealthy, and St. Charles West was more the wealthy area. So there was like it was really different because we would be with the other sisters who covered St. Charles West all the time, and we would like talk about our areas, and they were like really different. And so that was interesting. And in St. Charles, there's actually like this home. It's like a long-term care center. And when I got there was a man who had been baptized just about two or 3 months earlier. And he had been a referral from a lady in another ward. I don't know how she knew him, but he had been referred to the missionaries, and he got baptized, and he started giving Book of Mormons to every single person in this little like care center. And it was just a really like run-down care center, not very good care. Like it wasn't an ideal place to live at all. But we would be there like 2 to 3 times a week to teach Robert and his friends and all these people who, they're a bit strange because they all have some sort of mental disability of some sort, and that's why they're in this care center. And they're all sitting here wanting to learn about the gospel just because they love how it makes them feel. They all were excited for Bible study. 2 to 3 times a week we would go in, and they would love to just listen to us and read the Book of Mormon with us. And we actually ended up getting a couple other baptisms from that little community in the little care center from everyone, and everyone knew who we were. They'd be like, "Oh, look, there's the Mormon girls," and just like wave at us, even if they never came to our little study groups. They just loved to have us there, and it was really fun. My 4th area was Belvedere. I was in Belvedere for 6 months, so 4 transfers. It was my longest area, along with my last area was equal. And while I was there, we had so much success. When I first got there, they had set a goal to have 6 people on date to be baptized for the month of January, and I was like, that doesn't happen here. Like, that doesn't happen here in Illinois. What were you thinking? Why is this? And my companion was like, I don't know. Like, my past companion was the one who thought we could set that goal, and I was like, well, if she thought you could set the goal, we'll do it. And so they already had one person on date and one person they were planning on putting on date, but the other people, they're just like, we have no idea. And we were able to find people. And at one point we had 4 people on date, and it was almost the end of the month. And the last day of the month, we found 2 people, like this couple. We found them, and we were able to teach them the first lesson and put them on date in that lesson. And we reached our goal for that month of having 6 people on date for the month. And then literally the next week, the people, they were still interested. They called us and told us that they were moving. And so then they were off date because they were gone. And it was really interesting that we had faith in that goal, that we're like, okay, well, you thought you had to set that goal for a reason, so we're going to set it. And we had faith. And even though we didn't have 6 baptisms the next month, we were able to reach that goal. And it was really great. And really, it helped strengthen my testimony of goal setting. As a missionary, goal setting is really important. There's a lot of trains that go straight through the town and block traffic. Like on the main street, like literally on Main Street, there's a railroad crossing, and the trains will just like stop traffic for like 20 minutes because the trains are just going, and people are just like backed up on Main Street in Belvedere waiting for the trains. It's a smaller town. It's 10 minutes out of a big town though, Rockford, which was one of the biggest towns in Illinois. And and it's actually one of the most dangerous cities in the US, Rockford, Illinois. Like, it's on the list, even though most people haven't heard of it. It's on the list. And we were just like 10 minutes out of Rockford. But Belvedere is like a really safe little community, just a farming community outside of Rockford. In Belvedere, there was so much success, and we had there were a lot of lessons that we would teach. We would get referrals, we would find people, we had a lot of people to teach, a lot of less actives to teach, and our days would be filled with teaching lessons all the time, and we didn't have a whole lot of time to find new people. And we were like, well, we need to find new people. So my companion and I set a goal to knock at least one door and talk to one new person a day, which, you know, for most missionaries, like, oh, that's easy. But we were like packed full. We had to like end lessons early to get time to go out and knock these doors. And so one day we were going and we were knocking and no one was home. And we're like, we have an appointment in like 5 minutes. We gotta hurry. And so we're like knocking and we're like running down these apartments, knocking on these doors. And eventually we're like, no one's home. And we look, and across the parking lot, there's this woman cleaning out her car with her son. So we're like, okay, we'll go talk to her and she'll be our one person. And as we start walking over toward her, someone at the door we had just knocked opened. And so we're like, oh, no, this person. So we ran back to the door and we were talking to this person, and they were like semi-interested. They said we could come back, but like they were never there whenever we came back. But then we started heading back to our car afterward. Then we're like, maybe we should still go talk to that lady cleaning out her car. Like, we've still got a little bit of time. We might be a little late to our appointment, but we can do this. And so we went and we talked to this lady, and the first thing she says to us is, I'm an atheist, and just keeps cleaning out her car. And we're like, oh, that's cool. We just like kept talking to her, and she's like, I'm a paralegal. I don't care about this stuff. Leave me alone. And we're like, oh, well, there's a lawyer who's speaking in church tomorrow, because our mission president, he was a lawyer, he was coming to our ward and speaking in church. So we're like, so we invited her to church, and she's like, oh, that sounds cool. And so we're like, yeah. And then she was like open to more learning, and we were able to like give her a Book of Mormon, set up a return appointment. And then the next day at church, she didn't come. We weren't that surprised. And then we like called her that night, and she was like, oh, I was sick. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. You were sick. That's what everyone says. Everyone says they're sick. And so we're like, yeah, she's not interested. But we confirmed our appointment for Thursday. She's like, yeah, I'll be there. And we're like, okay, whatever. But we showed up fully expecting her to not be there. And she was there, and she let us in, and she was like, I read from this book, and it's true. And we were like, what? Yeah, it is. Like, it is. You're right. It is true. And it was so amazing. And she was baptized a month later, and she was so solid, and we love her. She was so great. I love her so much. And her son, they were both baptized together. And it was really amazing, because she was just flipping through the Book of Mormon, because she's like, oh, these girls gave me this book. And she had no intention of being there on Thursday. Like, she even told us after she got baptized, she's like, yeah, when you told me you set up that appointment for Thursday, in my head, I made plans right then to not be home that time on Thursday. And then she had to cancel those plans because she actually read from the Book of Mormon, and she knew it was true, just because she felt that spirit, and it answered questions that she had had for so long. She had literally just like a year earlier given up searching for churches, because she had been searching and gone to like who knows how many different churches for her whole life, just looking and looking and looking, and none of them just felt right to her until she met us and started learning about the gospel, and it was wonderful. It's kind of like a dual city, Bloomington, Normal. They kind of mashed together, and it's kind of funny that they mashed together because there are no other cities nearby. It's just like Bloomington, Normal, it's always together. And that's where ISU, Illinois State University, is. And so there's a lot of college kids in that town. Not in my area, it's more in the Normal area, not Bloomington, but there are a lot. And Bloomington Normal has a really wide range of, like, there are places that are very, very more poor, and then there are places that are more wealthy. And so you really got like a very wide variety of people. It's also a place where State Farm has this big company location, and they have a lot of people who work there from all over the place, especially people from India. So there are a lot of Indians all over Bloomington. One of my converts in my first transfer was actually an Indian woman named Pavitra. She was really fun. She was awesome. And it's just so fun because the Indian people they're so nice and polite. A lot of them aren't interested, but they'll let you in and they'll talk to you. And if you're able to help them understand what it's truly about, it really is interesting to help them learn more about Christianity in general, as well as the church and the gospel. They love to give you things, especially food. They want to give you food all the time. Kind of like Hispanics are kind of like that too. Like they want to give you food. Like even if you don't know them, like, oh, take this food. But the Indians, especially if they know you, if you've been over there, like Pavithra would bring us meals like twice a week, just like these spicy rice Indian meals all the time. It was great. The food that Pavithra made was all pretty similar. It was mostly just like rice with different spices and vegetables and occasionally chunks of meat and potatoes, but very little meat and potatoes. They have a really good bus system. That was the best bus system on my whole mission. That was an awesome bus system in Bloomington. My third area was Elgin. I was also only in Elgin for one transfer, so I didn't know it a whole lot. I think it's sometimes called like the city within a suburb or something, because it is more city-like. And I served in like the more, I guess you could pretty much call it ghetto area of Elgin. There were a lot of like rundown houses, but there was also a lot of cool old houses. It's kind of an old community where they have these like streets where it's like a historic community, and you just like drive down the streets and all these houses are like from, I don't know what era it is, but they just like look really cool and old fashioned and like weird colors. Like they'll just be like colorful and like little doll houses almost. And so that was really neat to be able to like walk down these streets tracting and like knock on these like fancy doors, and they all have these plaques that say like what year they were established. It's really awesome. And Elgin, like the ward was great. It was a really great ward, and it was a fun place. Elgin was very fun because it was just so, especially compared to my other two areas that were more like farm town places. This place, there were a lot of people, a lot of hustle and bustle, and it was really cool because we were actually able to like find a lot of people on the streets just as we were like walking, and it was really great. So I was only in Sycamore for one transfer, and it's more of a poor area. Lots of farms and like little small farm houses. And we covered, along with the small little town of Sycamore, we also covered like some of the outer towns that were around it. It's right next to DeKalb, which was kind of similar to like Bloomington Normal. It's like right next to DeKalb, and DeKalb is where NIU, Northern Illinois University, is. So it's kind of like similar to my first area in that aspect. There was a lot of tracting was done in that area. A lot of tracting. And sometimes people were nice, sometimes people were more not nice. That was probably one of my harder areas because we just didn't have many people to teach. But even though it was like my hardest area, I was with one of my best companions, and I would consider it one of my best transfers. Just because God really understands like what you're going through, and he puts people there who need to be there. So he knew it was going to be a hard area, and so he gave me this awesome companion. So it was still a great time, even though we maybe weren't having the success that maybe we wanted to, and we had a lot of hard days. It was still really great. So the people in Chicago, you find really, really interesting people. I'm sure that's true of everywhere, but like I haven't been everywhere, so I don't know. But just throughout Illinois, we did so much tracting all the time, and you just met the craziest people. They're just crazy, but then you love them because they're crazy. And it's just like so fun to just like learn to love these people, where like if I were to walk past a crazy person on the street now, I'd probably just be like, okay, leave me alone. Like just don't notice me, like keep walking. But like as a missionary, it was like these crazy people. I'm like, oh, I love them. Like they're the best. And you just like talk to them, and they're so fun, and they're just like, they just love, and everyone's so unique and different, and everyone has like their own opinions. And the people were actually like, I was kind of afraid that they'd be really rude, just because there are a lot of different churches out there. It's not part of the Bible Belt. It's way too north to be part of the Bible Belt, but it kind of has like a similar feel because there are like so many churches all over the place. And so everyone has their church. Everyone like loves their church. But like people were so kind. Like occasionally you'd meet someone who was just like, leave me alone, and like swear at you and slam the door. But for the most part, people are like, oh no, I'm okay, I have my own church. And we're like, oh sure, like just let us in, we can like share a message with you. And they would politely decline, but they were polite and that's great. And sometimes they would let us in and it would be nice. And even when the people were wanting to argue with us, you could like feel that they were arguing out of love because they were like concerned for our salvation as well. And so we're like sharing this because we're concerned for their salvation, and they're sharing and they're just like, no, you're confused. And we're like, no, you're confused. And like you could just like feel the love that these people had for you as well as you had for them. And it was just really fun and great. Once when I was in Elgin, we were teaching this woman, and she was really enthusiastic about the gospel. She would get baptized in a second if she could live the word of wisdom. But she had issues with that, and she was pregnant. And one morning during our studies, we get a call. We get a call from her, and we answer the phone. We're like, hey, what's up? And she's just like breathing heavily. She's like, and she's like, I'm in labor. And we're like, what? And she's like, can you come get me and take me to the hospital? And we're like, we can't, but we'll try to find someone who can. And we're just like, what the heck is going on? So we call the Relief Society president. Thankfully, she's like available. We like drive over to her house. We get in the Relief Society president's car with the woman, and we're going. And this woman, not only was she like in labor, like having contractions, she was also incredibly drunk, which is like so sad, but also so like, it was the craziest experience because she was like, it was insane. And we like take her to the hospital, and this was one of like my favorite moments like we were in the emergency room, and this woman is like, all right, what's your doctor's name? And this lady, she's like drunk, and she looks at the lady at the desk, and she's like, Smith, Joseph. And so this lady at the counter starts looking up this doctor, and my companion and I are just laughing. We're like, that's not her doctor. And this lady, like, she's cracking jokes on purpose. She's like a hoot, and she's just like making these jokes, and she's like in love with Joseph Smith. She's like, he has the most beautiful blue eyes. And we're like, what? And so we're just like, just be quick, like, no, just stop. And so we get up, and this lady, like, they help her. She doesn't have the baby then. It was like way too early, and it was good. And she ended up having the baby a few months later, and the baby was perfectly healthy, and it's all good, and he's a beautiful little boy now, and it's wonderful. And so we're glad everything turned out all right. But it was just a crazy experience, just like get that call and like have to take her in. We had to get permission because the hospital was out of our zone. We had like call the mission president, be like, can we take our investigator to the hospital because she's in labor? Like, we're going with a member. And it was crazy. It was like still like 8 a.m. We hadn't even had our studies yet, and it was a crazy experience, but it's fun to look back on and think about. When I was in Belvedere, there were tornadoes, a lot of tornadoes. Like, we had like tornado warnings before, but none of them had ever touched down around where I was at. And at this time, like, I was with my companion. She had been out in the field for a week. Like, it was her first week in the mission field, and we're at this member's house eating dinner, and we had gotten like text that was like, tornado watch, be careful, like it's gonna be crazy weather tonight. But like usually when they say tornado watch, it's just like there's gonna be a thunderstorm, like there's a possibility of them maybe having a tornado, and so no one really thinks much of it. Then we're at this member's house eating, and then all of a sudden, like, the tornado sirens go off, and we're like, oh, okay. And so then we like turn on the TV to like go and watch the weather, and they're like, there are tornadoes in the area forming, touching down. And that night there were like 7 different tornadoes that touched down, like in the northern Illinois, Wisconsin area, and 2 of them went right past Belvedere. And it was like crazy. Like, the skies were green, there was so much lightning, there was giant hail that we could just like, because we went down into the basement, we like could hear it pounding on the windows. It was scary, but it was actually just kind of like really cool to be able to be with this family, because the woman we were with, her husband was out of town, actually on like a youth mutual activity or something, and she had 4 young boys, and they were all like super like scared, freaking out. And so to be able to like be down there and help her and comfort them, and we were able to like watch a bunch of little like fun Mormon messages, play a lot of little fun missionary games, and we did like all of our object lessons with them. And it was so fun because these little boys who at first were so scared, they were able to have that comfort of the Spirit as we were like in this basement, like teaching them these things they already knew, but just like helping them feel the Spirit. And later we were talking to that woman, the sister, and she was like, I'm so grateful that you were there, because if you hadn't been there, I would have been freaking out and my boys would have been freaking out, and it would have been the most terrifying night of our lives. But it wasn't, because we were able to have that comfort from the Spirit. And the tornadoes, there were actually 2 that touched down like right around Belvedere, and one went just south of Belvedere and one went just north of Belvedere, and they literally like went around Belvedere and didn't cause any damage in the actual city. There was a small like local zoo just south of town that was hit, but it wasn't very bad. And we were actually able to go and do tornado cleanup in the zoo. That was fun too. Like, that was exciting. But yeah. The winters get pretty cold, but I actually didn't even take a winter coat or buy a winter coat at all. I might not suggest that, but I actually I took like a couple less heavy coats so I could like wear them in like the fall and the spring, and then I just like layered them in the winter. But then there were actually, in the area that I was in, like my whole really bad winter there was a member who saw that I was wearing like a thinner coat, but we weren't going to be outside much that day, so I was just wearing a thinner coat. And so she lent me her winter coat for like the whole time I was in that area. So that was nice. But I'd probably suggest having more warm clothes, although layering worked well for me. I guess it just depends on what you want, what you care about. But then in the summers it also gets really hot and humid, so you definitely need like a wide variety of like nice cool things, but then also like things that can keep you warm. And don't worry about having to take everything, because I mean it is a stateside mission and you get to go shopping. You can buy things if you're like, oh darn it, I don't have that. You can buy it. It's not like you're out of that thing for 18 months. Like, you definitely, like, there are things that you can buy. Like, if you try to pack, don't necessarily feel like you need to pack light, but don't freak out if you don't have room for everything. I definitely matured. I feel like people who didn't know me before the mission but know me now would probably disagree, because they would say like, well, you're not very mature. But people who knew me before and now are like, okay, yeah, you did. Because, yeah. But yeah, it was just every aspect of your life, you just like grow. Just like socially, physically, spiritually, emotionally, just because it's so trying on every single aspect of your life that you're just able to be so strengthened. I think probably a spiritual highlight for my mission would just be my last couple weeks. On my last couple weeks of the mission, I was able to go to the temple 3 times in 3 weeks, which, like most missions, like even if there's a temple in your mission, like that's not usual. But we had a zone temple trip, and then there was a special sisters conference, and the sisters were all able to go to the temple. And then the next week was when I left, and all the departing missionaries were able to go to the temple. And so to be able to go to the temple after only going like once in the past 18 months, to be able to go 3 times in 3 weeks like that was just really, really special. And it was really helped me, especially with the transition of coming home, because I was able to really ponder about that and think about that. And it really, it was really emotional and spiritual, and it really helped me receive a lot of revelation that I needed for finishing up my mission strong, and also to blend that in with not being like super weird when I come home, like, to be able to find that balance. And it was really just amazing that I was able to be blessed with that opportunity to go to the temple that many times, still as a missionary, and transition into coming home. I think that what I learned the most on the mission was charity for everyone. Because as I said before, like, there are so many crazy people. People are weird. I mean, I'm weird too, but like different weird. And people are just crazy. And if you think about it, like, sometimes you're like, okay, well, I have a little less love for you. But as like a missionary, you just have that love is for everyone. And although I don't have as much charity as I did as a missionary, you know, when you're set apart, it's like, it's a lot easier. But I've been able to like apply that more. And if someone like gets on my nerves or bothers me or does something, I'm just like so annoyed at them, I kind of like think back to like, okay, well, I need to love them. Like, we all have our flaws, but I have that charity for them and that pure love of Christ, and just like have that love for everyone, even if maybe you don't necessarily get along or like them very much, or if they just do something all the time that you really don't like. Being a missionary really helped me to overcome that flaw I had of seeing flaws in others and judging them. I love food. Most of the food was good. The members fed us really well, and it was great. Back to the lady who was baptized a month after we met her, who like knew the Book of Mormon was true and who had originally told us she was an atheist. Right before she was going to get baptized, we found out there was something in her past that made it so that she possibly wouldn't be able to get baptized without special permission. And so we had to like call our mission president and get all this like special information, and he needed to know more information. He's like, I might need to contact the First Presidency about this, or if I can get enough information, it sounds like it's something that maybe I can just approve. And so we had to call this woman, and we asked her like a bunch of questions, like, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? And we were just like freaking out because we're like, we want to make sure that you can get baptized. And I guess we didn't communicate things well enough with her, because then that night we got a text and she was like, well, if this church is gonna judge me for my past, maybe I don't want to be part of it anymore. And this was just like 2 days before her baptism, and we're just like, what? No! And so we start crying and praying and calling her, and she like didn't answer her phone, and we're just like freaking out. We're like, she was so perfect and golden, and just because of this one issue, she's like falling off the face of the earth. And that was like the hardest day of my life, was that next day, because we had a meeting, so all day we had to go to Naperville, and so we were 4 hours from this woman and from the place where we were supposed to be at. And so we're just like, we need to like go see her, we need to stop by, like we have an appointment tomorrow, I wonder if she's still gonna be there, like I don't even know what's going on. And we were just like, we would occasionally text her or call her, and just like no answer, and we're just freaking out all day. We're like, she's not getting baptized, what's happening? And our mission president talked to us at the meeting. He was like, how is she doing? Is she still good? And we're like, we think so, President, yeah. You're still gonna interview her tomorrow, don't worry, like she'll be there. Because we didn't want to like make him doubt her. And so we were stressing out, and like it was a really emotional time, and we were freaking out. And then that night she called us, and she just like started talking like it was normal and like nothing had happened, and we're just like, okay, like are you still gonna come to your interview tomorrow? Are you still having our appointment tomorrow? Are you still gonna get baptized? And she's like, oh yeah, like oh, it's fine, I was just in a bad mood last night, like don't worry about it. And we're like, are you serious? Like, why didn't you answer your phone or your text or anything? We were worried sick. And she's like, oh no, it's fine. I was in a bad mood, and my son made a mess in the kitchen, and I was just like, I was angry. And we were just like so relieved, but so angry at her. We're like, communicate with us. Let us know what's going on. But that day was probably like, it was like the hardest time, because she was so solid, and we were worried sick. We're like, she's gonna fall off the face of the earth, she's gonna ignore us and everything, and she was so ready, and she still was. But just that pain that we went through and that heartache, and like we were like praying like crazy, and our prayers were answered, and that was really amazing. I definitely miss being a missionary and having that feeling, and all the people, the other missionaries I served with, the members I was with, the people that I met who got baptized, people I met who didn't get baptized, everyone, all the people that I interacted with on my mission, a lot of them are still there. And so I miss them. I don't necessarily miss like the place. Like if I was there, it would bring back the memories. And so like that's cool. But it's mostly just the people, all the people. I'm so excited for you to go to the Illinois Chicago West mission. I know everyone says that their mission is the best mission, but I know that this mission was the best mission for me. And because you were called there, it's the best mission for you. And as you're there, as long as you serve faithfully and do all that you can, even if you don't feel like it's enough, but just do all that you can, it will be enough. And you will have the best time. And this will be the best mission. You'll learn so much, and you'll grow so much, and you'll help so many people. And so many great things will happen because of you, because this is where God needs you to be. And that's why he called you there, for a specific purpose that only you can fulfill.